It's good to see you, my friend. I'm glad we're able to actually sit down and do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking
Yeah, yeah,
forward to it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you and I have obviously talked a few times, and you were gracious enough to add some insight into my newsletter, and I greatly appreciate that. And we had an opportunity to talk at Work Truck Week, and we thought, hey, let's just turn this into a podcast. So I think the audience is going to be, as I was, I think they're going to be interested to know what the differences are between a roll up door. I've been in this industry for 30 years, and probably due to my region, I never really had to look at different options on roll up doors. And then lo and behold, you guys make this PVC door that was so intriguing to me that
Mm.
I just think people need to learn more about it. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about McLaren Doors and how it got started and a little bit of the history, and then tell us really specifically about what the advantages are of a PVC door and what all it has to offer.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's pretty exciting. We should have actually been recording when we first spoke because, a 15-minute conversation turned into an hour and a half
Oh my gosh, yes it
twice.
did. It did, yes. Yes it has.
So it's just great. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, so McLaren Doors. So where do I even begin? We're a manufacturer. We're a manufacturer of PVC roll-up overhead truck and trailer doors, specializing in dry freight and reefer applications.
Okay.
And I guess how we differ from those roll-up doors in the industry is that we're lightweight. Especially when guys are opening and closing so many times per day. The lightweight component helps to alleviate any possible injury.
Mm.
I don't know if you've used any roll up doors before, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they take on so much moisture and get heavy. And then you're like, trying to pull, and you're like, oh, my shoulder, and then the door is rusting and peeling and delaminating. So that's kind of a benefit of a PVC door because it doesn't do that,
Mm.
especially if you're in a coastal area,
Mm-hmm.
that sea air, you don't want that kind of rusting and peeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess how we differ is we're probably between 100 and 118 pounds less weight than your traditional door.
Oh wow. Okay.
So that's significant, especially, again, opening and closing 20 times per day
Yeah.
or more.
Or more. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of a quick
Wow.
elevator version of what we manufacture, but I mean, I
Yeah.
can get into further details if you'd like.
Well, and I think, from my experience in the past, when you start looking at the traditional wooden doors with an aluminum overlay, if you will,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, you're right. Anytime that I would have trucks that would come in that, somebody's wanting to trade in or whatever,
Hmm.
most of those bodies typically are on a truck that's been in service for minimally, 6, 8, 10 years, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
Those doors do get heavy, and you don't really realize that just looking from the outside, and it looks like it's maybe the spring actuators or the rollers or things like that. You don't really factor in the additional weight that
Hmm.
door is taking on, because it has properties that allows it to um, penetrate. And then you're right, you see those doors, and they're and oftentimes they're just wood rotted. They're just
That's
falling
right.
apart, and a lot of companies, they don't even replace them. I mean, they honestly, the person that would need to probably make the decision on replacing the doors probably never looks at the doors,
Hmm.
because if they did, then they would realize that, especially on a reefer application, that a lot of the process is just going out the back door, literally.
Yeah.
uh you
But
know you're trying to hold temperature, and you got a hole back there, and it's not holding temperature. Anyway,
yeah, yeah,
no, it's an interesting concept. So
absolutely. And I mean, it really helps fleets to address,
mm,
maintenance.
mm-hmm,
And, because with a PVC door, there's not a lot of maintenance that's needed on the doors. You don't need to grease the rollers.
mm-hmm,
Um, our door specifically has a bottom panel aluminum extrusion
Mm,
as well as aluminum reinforcements throughout to increase the rigidity of the door. Because a
mm,
lot of times people will think, oh, PVC, it's just plastic, it's brittle, but there's a flex in PVC.
mm.
So if you have, you know, a forklift driver that's maybe not so trained, is that
Coordinated.
coordinated? There you go. There you go.
Right.
Uh, there's going to be damage to a bottom panel.
Mhm,
If you're going to take a car and ram it into a wall, there's going to be damage. It doesn't matter
mhm,
what door you have on there. Um, but there is a flex in PVC. And
mhm,
then because we have that bottom panel aluminum extrusion, um, it helps to kind of increase the strength and rigidity of the door,
mhm,
right? Um, I guess benefits of just being lighter,
mhm,
um, low maintenance,
mhm,
and the way that we've designed our panels. Uh, it's called a cargo seal.
mhm,
When you roll the door up, it creates a seal because we have an internal hinge mechanism.
mm,
So it stops any water penetration from falling on your cargo.
mm.
So it kind of keeps everything nice and clean and dry. So, you're not having to get rid of the top layer of, I don't know, if you're carrying yogurt or whatever.
Mhm.
So it's protecting drivers from possible injury, protecting
Yeah.
cargo. So that's kind of
I could see where that would be very beneficial in a reefer application where
mhm,
you would have perishables that are loaded
absolutely.
onto a pallet with an open box system.
Hmm.
I
Yep.
can see where, not necessarily the rain, but uh, the snow and the ice and the
Hmm.
salt or whatever's accumulating, road grime, anything that's accumulating on that door, when you open up that door, if it doesn't have that inner seal
That's
that
right.
that the McLaren door has, it can drip down at least in the back 8 feet, which
Hmm.
theoretically could be 4 pallets if you were fully loaded.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then if it's dripping all over, your product back there, I can see where that becomes a mess. If it's boxes, it's a little different. It just makes for a mess. But if it's a product, let's say it's jalapenos or strawberries or whatever, cherries or whatever, that filters all the way down to the bottom. So everything
Hmm.
that grime and dirt and whatever it's going to touch is going to get all the way to the bottom. So yeah,
Yeah,
I could see where that's a huge benefit, really, to be
for
honest.
sure. Grocery, dairy, delivery, healthcare, you know,
Mm. Hmm.
especially, during pandemic. We
Mm.
had a lot of, healthcare fleets that
Hmm.
needed to keep those
Yeah.
vaccines safe,
Sterile.
sterile. There you go.
Sterile. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I could certainly see that because
Hmm.
I spent a little time in the transport refrigeration industry, and I learned
Hmm.
so much about perishables that I was astonished in what I found. So at the time, this was in the late '90s, so probably almost 30 years ago now. Whenever a product was either let's just use picked. If you have something that's coming out of the ground and it's picked and it's temperature sensitive,
Hmm.
cherries are the most temperature sensitive product you can ship around. They only have about a 2 degree variance
Hmm.
on cherries before they can either become freezer burnt or they become just not sellable.
Hmm.
Anyway, with that being said, um, the product has to be, or then I think it's changed now. But the product had to be, uh, uh, they had to keep the temperature regulation on the product from the time that it was picked until the time that it went into the truck.
Hmm.
And then they had to, whoever the receiver was had to make sure that, and they called it temp probing. They had to probe to get temp. For example, if a load showed up and it was not within the parameter of a safe level, then the receiver could reject that product, right?
Hmm.
So if let's say a load of meat comes in and let's say 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and it needed to be somewhere around 38, let's call it. If that meat showed up uh, above temperature, they would just reject it, And then it was up to the shipper to be able to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with it? They dispose of it, whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I found back then, and again, this is a United States regulation. I don't know what it was like in Canada. I would assume it was probably the same.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, you didn't have to have any sort of analytics from the time that it was loaded to the time that it was empty. So, for example, if someone allowed a shipment to get out of range, whether it be frozen or too hot, as long as it temp probed at the correct temperature when it was delivered, then there was no accountability for the time that it was on the truck.
Hmm.
So when people say you can't refreeze meat, I'm like, oh yeah, you can. I've seen it. Especially down here in Texas where it got really hot
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of the summer. Most of your transport refrigeration facilities
Mm-hmm.
will only work on your vehicle if it's loaded. So if you have a trailer that's loaded, you get priority. The problem is most of these shops are small enough to where even with priority, if you're empty, um, they wouldn't have time to get to you. There's just not enough man hours in the day. So
Hmm.
quite possibly, if you're empty, you could end up sitting for several days up to a few weeks to get your refrigerated unit repaired. Um, Transversely, what would happen because there was no accountability of that time that when you were loaded, a lot of drivers would go and get loaded
Just so they
knowing
could get serviced.
absolutely even
Mm.
though they knew the reefer wasn't working,
Yeah.
but they would come back and get priority so they can get through the line.
Hmm.
So that's they. I'm almost positive since they've changed that regulation now to
Mm-hmm.
where you have to have accountability from the time that it was picked or killed to the time that it gets to the register, if you will. There has to be
Mm-hmm.
accountability in there, which is better for everybody, to be honest. But yeah, I can certainly see where every component within a box, whether it be a trailer or truck mounted, has to work together in order
Absolutely.
for that load, especially refrigerated loads. It has to
Mm-hmm.
all work together in order for it to be fully uh, um, capable of working together from front to back. You get a 53
Yes.
foot trailer and it's losing air temp at the rear because of the door, you've got a problem because
Mm-hmm.
everything at the back, let's say, for example, it needs to be at 50 degrees. If at the back they're at 60, but at the front they're at 40, that's not good for either. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing that you have is right in the middle when it's 50 degrees. So, yeah, that the door plays into everything, as
Absolutely.
importantly as anything within that box or trailer, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just even learning about roll-up doors.
Mm.
I've only been in the industry for 8 years,
Oh, okay.
and like I just thought that everything came as one.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, first it's the chassis, then you go to your box manufacturer. And at the time, before I accepted the role with McLaren Doors, I was like, what do you mean they don't build the roll-up doors? That seems like an extra
Hmm.
step. Why wouldn't you just do it all in one? I
Hmm.
mean, then I would be talking myself out of a job, mind you. So
Right.
strike that from the record.
Right.
But
Yeah.
no, I didn't. I mean, you don't realize that at the time if
Yeah.
you're not involved in the industry. So,
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, I would think that a lot of people feel that way that aren't in our industry. They
hmm
just assume that whenever that truck is completed, that it was built start to finish that way. And no, that's not
hmm
the case at all.
yeah,
There are so many other components to it. And,
hmm
one would assume, for example, when you look at an airplane, that the manufacturer makes everything from stem to stern. That's not true.
yeah,
They outsource a lot of it,
hmm
more so now than they ever used to. Henry Ford, I'd venture to say, I don't know this to be fact, but I don't think he made the rubber for the tires, but he made everything else in between.
hmm
I think that was the only thing that they didn't make at the time was the rubber. But yeah, it's an intriguing industry for sure. So you said you've only been in it for 8 years.
hmm
What'd you do before that?
I was a newspaper publisher. Yeah,
Okay, all
yeah,
right.
completely different.
Newspaper publisher
Uh,
to industry expert in roll up rear doors. Wow. Okay. That's a big jump.
It's a huge jump. It's a huge jump.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had a newspaper for quite some time. And then it was probably, well, 9 years ago, and decided that, I need a change. I need something else. I just need to get out of the rat race because everything's a deadline, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're on 24/7. So, I sold the company, and then I was like, okay, what's my next move? What do I want to do now? And one of my advertisers with the newspaper came to me and said, listen, I have a roll up door company, and I think that you'd be a really great fit, to kind of head this. And I was like, what do I know? What do I know about, transportation? Absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yes, but you know sales.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter what you're selling, right? As long as you know your product. And for me personally, I have to believe in what I'm selling,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't want to be involved.
Yeah.
So I went to a truck show, and it was my first truck show called Truck World in Toronto.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. Like I kind of geeked out a little bit. And I was just like, oh, what am I going to do? I don't know. And I spoke to an OEM there, and we were just talking about manufacturing and doors. And by speaking with him, he kind of, nudged me to say, you know what? I think you'd be really great in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, from his feedback and kind of his prompting, I was like, okay, let's give it a go. And, I'll give it a year and see how it goes. And then I kind of fell in love with the industry. And, being a male dominated industry,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really, I mean, even 8 years ago, there weren't really a lot of women in transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I felt intimidated, really
Mm.
intimidated. And then, after learning the product, learning the industry, attending trade shows, networking,
Mm-hmm.
then, I knew my product, and
Yeah.
I knew the industry. So then, you know, I learned the business.
Mm-hmm.
I found allies, not
Mm.
approval.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it took time. And then, people were coming to me
Mm.
to, find out more about McLaren doors, or it wasn't me searching them, or, we're setting up as a trade show booth,
Mm-hmm.
and, trying to communicate our brand messaging and who we are. And then, me going out to who I want to see. And then it kind of started to reverse, where people were coming to us and to
Mm.
me. Like for
Okay.
me, I think from coming from publishing, it was very relational. And because our company is a family business, I still kind of have those values that it is all about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I say I'm going to call you, I'm going to call you. If there's an issue with a customer, we're going to provide solutions, so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I got involved.
That's crazy. But you're right, because I think if people, so when you look at sales,
Mm,
for example, um, I think there's several methods to selling, especially in my world in commercial truck sales.
hmm
And each method requires a little different skill set, a little different mindset, and I firmly believe that um, there are methods that people will, no matter how much training you put them through, they're just not going to be able to um, perform at a high level
hmm
with a method, if you will, outside of their comfort zone, skill set, or their natural tendency is probably more. So, for example, um, I think you can take a good salesperson that um, is flexible, if you will, put them in front of a product or a service that they can truly believe and get
Hmm.
behind,
Yeah.
fully immerse that person in the product or the service, and I think they can, in most cases, be successful uh, at some level.
Hmm.
But I think an overwhelming majority of salespeople jump into an industry that they don't know anything about
Yep.
on willingness and not given the correct direction and not fully identifying maybe what their strengths or natural tendencies are,
Hmm.
they tend to struggle. For example, like in my world, commercial truck sales is completely different than retail car sales. It's a different mindset. It's a different skill set. It's a different customer. Even though it's a human being that's making the purchase, you're selling to business owners that look at the purchase different than if they're buying a car for themselves personally.
Correct.
And just because you see people within a dealership structure that are salespeople doesn't make them, um, just being a salesperson doesn't improve the likelihood that they'll succeed in all of these methods. It takes a special flexibility, if you will,
Hmm.
for someone like you that stepped out of publishing and went into the commercial truck industry to sell a product. That's a huge jump. Now, what part of that may have been was because you didn't know anything about the industry, so you didn't already have these preconceived notions of
That's right.
what will and what won't, right? And that I think what who recruited you was we need a fresh look on this. And if
Hmm.
they can bring you in and convince you or allow you to see what you can truly stand behind or believe in,
Hmm.
then that works out well for them in the fact that you're not going to say, okay, well, I was with this company over here and they did it differently. And because you guys don't do it that way, it won't work. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of that happens in our industry. They want to bring their past experiences with them, rightfully so, because that's either allowed them success or failure,
Hmm.
but that's what they know. So everybody wants to go back to what they know and what they're comfortable with. So they bring those bad habits, if you will,
Hmm.
into the new business, and then they continue to struggle because they weren't able to clear the cachet, if you will,
Hmm.
to be able to look at a new way of doing business and possibly a new product. So for you to step up and have the success that you're having in
Hmm.
a male dominated industry speaks
Hmm.
volumes. That is not easy doing what you're doing, much
It's
less having
it's
the
been hard.
right and having the gender, if you will, the gender hurdles
Hmm.
of what because in perception, everybody has this idea of what a salesperson looks like,
Of
and you
course.
show up, and it a lot of times it contrasts with what their vision is. It's like
Hmm.
it's not
Hmm.
at all what I was expecting. Now, when they just stop and listen to what you have to offer, you're just as qualified as anybody else if they can just
Hmm.
get past the gender. I don't want to say bias. Bias is a strong word. The gender hurdle, if you will.
Hurdle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So good for
No, that
you.
it's amazing though. I mean, obviously when I first started in the role, I was very, you know,
Oh, yeah,
not confident, right?
yeah.
And then, over time, I gained this confidence in terms of I know my product. So
Hmm.
when I'm speaking with somebody and, I'm talking about, EV technology and how, a lot of fleets are implementing, EV into their as prototypes.
Hmm.
And by having a lightweight door component to alleviate the weight somewhere,
Hmm.
it's really a win-win. But
Right.
just little things like that where, some might just look at me as a female and going, okay, well,
Yeah.
she's just here to as a body to
Yeah.
to sell or to provide me the brochure and a tape measure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
All
it's
right. Well, but along with that, it becomes the not necessarily the female male aspect of it, but it's
Mm,
also the lack of industry experience that you had.
hmm.
Um, had you walked in somewhere, let's say, and you had 30 years experience, that carries different weight than someone that's brand
Yeah,
new.
yeah.
Um, and that you could say that for men as well. It's like um, I've had some young men
Hmm.
recently reach out to me and say, "Hey, you really have what I want. You have this following. How can I get there?" I was like, you know, give it 30 years, like I did.
Yeah,
But right,
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
30 years of experience that's talking. It's 30 years of experience that
Hmm.
I'm able to explain in a way.
Hmm.
And then there's some of these, and I'm gonna call them kids. They're not kids, but they're in their early 20s. They want to be able to fast track that to say, okay, I
Hmm.
want a podcast and I want a newsletter and I want a successful networking group, and I want it right now. It's like, okay, but my question to them was, what do you offer? What are you going to tell me that I don't already know and that I've
Hmm.
experienced before you were born? Which I'm not saying that someone that's young can't bring something to the table, but I need to know what that is.
Yeah.
Is it product knowledge? Okay, what
Hmm.
what makes you stand out? Is it real world experiences? I mean,
Hmm.
okay, what could you possibly talk about? Were you a missionary in the Philippines, let's say? Okay, well that's intriguing to me.
Hmm.
And what that does, it just lends to um, another talking point to keep talking to an employer or potential new customer, whatever that might be. But when
Hmm.
you come to the table with nothing, it's very difficult to get up and rolling. I explain it as it's like watching a locomotive. When they first try to get going, the wheels are spinning and it
Hmm.
takes a long time to get that traction. But once you get going down the track, if you stay to your methods and stay to yourself, really, you can create a lot of momentum. And that's what people have to do, but they have to allow it to have time to build the
Hmm.
momentum. It just doesn't happen overnight. So,
Yeah,
uh,
no, absolutely.
yeah. So I kudos to you for doing it because it's difficult. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? I have this kind of quote that I, sometimes glance at. The
Yeah.
goal isn't to stand out as a woman, it's to stand strong in the work.
Oh, very nice. I like that.
Yeah, yeah,
That speaks volumes. Yeah. Yeah. Very nice.
yeah.
Well,
So
perfect.
anyway.
Okay, so tell us as we start talking about the next gen.
Mhm.
Um, where do you see the market, the business, the industry? What do you see it evolving to over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
I think a lot of fleets are trying to implement EV. I mean, it's
Mm,
very expensive, from what I understand.
mm,
Um, it all depends because we don't know what's happening in the world with oil and gas and diesel.
mm,
So it's just I hope to see, people implementing our roll-up doors more within
mm,
their fleet. It's almost kind of the door of the future. I think
mm,
that we, or the future is now, if you will.
mm,
Uh, our doors were implemented, I think, too early in the marketplace,
mm,
and maybe they weren't ready or sorry, the market wasn't ready for us.
mm, mm,
But I think now over the years, especially over the past 8 years, where we've really um, started to be an option for OEM builds, a request from customers to be, part of those builds, replacement doors, and I think the cost effectiveness is really important too, because a lot of times people are like, oh, okay, well, it's mainly cost. I don't care what kind of door it is,
mm,
right? But then once they hear the benefits and the low maintenance tends to outweigh that,
mm,
down the line.
mm,
So, I'm thinking that technology is going to have a play in the industry, definitely,
mm.
or EV
Yeah,
rather.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. The electric vehicles. Um, it. I mean, obviously, that's a that's a subject that you start to think, okay, well, the technology's got to get a lot better than what it is
Yes.
to, today, right?
Mm.
If
And the
it's,
infrastructure too, right?
oh, for sure. Now, I
Yeah.
could see hybrid technology.
Hmm.
Hybrid technology
Yeah, a
makes
little bit of
sense.
both, right? Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But then,
Hmm.
the benefits of being all electric and hybrid really kind of uh, cancel each other out. The reason why electric works is the virtually no maintenance to an all electric vehicle. That's the big selling point. Infrastructure is a big hurdle that we're all having to get around. Range anxiety is still a big thing. But
Hmm.
if you had a truck, and I know Harbinger is really trying to change the market when it comes to
Hmm.
full electric chassis type vehicles,
Hmm.
and their range on their chassis are astounding. I mean, I think they have some plus 300 miles, and I want to say, if I remember correctly, in that 500-mile range.
Hmm.
I don't know that that works for over the road trucking because those trucks tend to go more than 500 miles in a day on
Hmm.
average. But I can certainly see last mile delivery, something that's going to stay pretty domiciled and might have, let's say, a 200-mile range
Hmm.
versus something that needed, 600 to 700 miles of range. I could see last mile delivery, but then the battery pack starts to play into it. So therefore, that's when you start to see the weight savings of the rear door.
Right.
You said your door on average saves about 150 pounds. What does an average door weigh?
Well, probably about 100. The weight savings is probably between 100 and 118 pounds,
Oh,
depending
118. Okay.
on size, if you have insulation, if it's a dry freight application, and it ranges. A lot of times with competitors, they'll say, "Oh, our door is lightweight," but they're not giving you the whole weight of the door. It's just their panel weight.
Mm,
So, we're including hardware, tracks, counterbalance,
hmm.
and the actual door. So it ranges. So you're looking at, a couple 100 pounds, um,
Mm,
versus 400 pounds or,
right.
350 pounds. So, and there's the lifting weight as well, right?
Sure.
So, which a lot of people won't take into account because they're not thinking of it.
Right. And what a lot of maintenance probably doesn't include, unless you were looking at companies like, let's say, Ryder or Penske, that
Hmm.
does a little more maintenance to their vehicles.
Hmm.
A end user, if you will, they're not going to consider the door a problem because generally, when they see the door, it's closed. Well, it
Hmm.
doesn't look like a problem when it's closed, but trying to open it and close it, that's where the problem is. And
Hmm.
those doors, as they accumulate weight over time, unlike, let's say, your garage door, which most
Hmm.
garage doors are aluminum,
Hmm.
they don't stack on weight over time.
Hmm.
But the difference is there, that door was sprung and adjusted to accommodate the weight at the time that the door was installed.
Hmm.
You add another 50 pounds to that door due to moisture penetration, whatever's going to add weight to that door, that now changes where your spring needs to be sprung. And
Absolutely.
right, so when you see a lot of doors that struggle, then they start to get off track, is because
Hmm.
they are hard to open. And
Hmm.
I'm guessing the PVC door, once you set it to the spring tension that it needs to be at the weight of installation, I don't think that changes that much. Am I right?
So, well, there's two things. So, we use galvanized springs versus
Mm.
oil tempered springs. So,
Oh,
and the
okay.
differences are, so an oil tempered spring is something that our competitor will use. And some people prefer that, where you set it and forget it,
Mm-hmm.
right? With a galvanized spring, you set it, and then over time, you're going to have to make an adjustment so you don't have that door hanging, right?
Mm.
Um, the difference is if an oil spring faults,
Mm-hmm.
that door will come crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the galvanized, then it's just going to hang and you're not going to have a possible fatality
Mm-hmm.
or an injury.
Sure.
So that's kind of the differences, right? So, and with our doors, it's kind of, you're adjusting the spring, what, every 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how many revolutions of opening and closing
Sure.
per day. But I mean, and then you also have your rollers. You got to think of that. Rollers, what kind of rollers are being used? We're using a stainless steel 2-inch nylon roller, and the bearing is stainless. A lot of other companies won't have that stainless bearing, and then the rollers rust,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, kind of a few different variables there.
Mm-hmm. Those are big variables, though,
Hmm.
um, because I agree with your statement of people want to set that door and forget about it. It just
Yeah.
becomes, part of the operation, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Nobody really wants to pay attention, nor do they really want to um, allocate the funds to be able to properly maintain their vehicles. That's why you see vehicles going down the road all the time, and they're not properly maintained
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
is expensive. It
Hmm.
is not. It is not cost prohibitive to, but if you're looking at longevity of a vehicle, it needs to be done.